propose to you that pi represents on one level the Messiah and the Messiah's function, and gives us a way of viewing things like the book of Revelation, where we're not just seeing that book presumptively or with presumption as being automatically chronological or automatically linear or automatically future. You ever seen that movie Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey? In that movie, there's a part that really had an impact on me that I thought was very significant. I mean, a lot of it. It's a pretty good movie, I thought. But they had been contacted by these aliens, and these aliens had sent them a message. And as hard as they tried, they weren't able to make heads or tails out of it. It was just gibberish. I mean, it didn't make any sense. Finally, someone had the idea, what if this message we're trying to interpret two-dimensionally? What if it's not two-dimensional? And so they projected that message holographically, like into 3 dimensions, and suddenly it made sense. Suddenly it was clear. I think a lot of times the same thing is true when we're studying the Bible and the book of Revelation particularly. Most of the time when people are studying the book of Revelation, like anything else, they come at it from prepackaged programming, paradigms. I guess I'm stuck on P words at the moment. But all of the religious conditioning from the culture and from the religious culture causes people to normally see that book in a very narrow way. They normally see the book of Revelation as dealing with the future ahead of us in time. Nearly everybody interprets it through that lens. Excuse me. And they also, I think most people see the book of Revelation as merely covering a few short years, whether 3.5 years or 7 years or something like that. Basically, that's how they interpret that normally. There's lots of other things like that. Years ago, I started questioning my paradigms. Well, I always have, but I started really questioning them much more deeply and seriously and systematically. And so I started thinking about the book of Revelation. And because I thought that I kind of understood it, I thought I had a pretty good handle on prophecy and the book of Revelation and things like that. But I got to question it. Finally, I came to the conclusion, I don't think I understand any of this. And so I began to pray, and I began to acknowledge that I didn't understand anything. And I feel like I began to start getting some answers to that, and in the forms of questions. And I like to deal with questions. I like to ask a lot of questions because I think that's one of the best ways to learn. It's a very Hebraic way of teaching, is by asking questions. That is one of the primary ways that I teach art classes or anything that I do, is with questions, because that way you're able to work through the whole thing and you understand it better than if somebody just tells you the answer. And so I began to really question a lot of my paradigms and understanding about the book of Revelation. One of the things that I remember, I thought, these questions began to come to me. How do you know the book of Revelation is chronological? And I'd never really thought about that. And I thought, well, I guess I don't really know that. And another question that came to me, that's why I brought up Contact. How do you know the book of Revelation is linear? And I thought, well, that's kind of strange. I thought, how could it be anything else? But these strange synchronicities began to occur in which I would run into things and which began to change my paradigm in the way I thought about the book of Revelation and many other things. And this is one example of that. And so I want to look at a number of passages, and I'll try to make this as quick as I can. The book of Revelation, we've got, most people look at it, like I said, very narrowly. They don't ever think of it by looking at the big picture. I say they don't. Most people don't think about it of looking at the book as a whole, holographically even. That was another big paradigm shift when I read a book called The Holographic Universe and began to learn about holographs. And it's pretty interesting because, like, a holograph, like if I take a picture of something, like if I take we have a picture of you, and say an 8x10 picture, and we cut that picture into quarters, we've ruined that picture. Or let's use another example. Let's say we've got a picture of an apple, an 8x10 picture of an apple, and we divide it up into 1-inch squares or something like that. Well, we've ruined the picture, and if we pass those out to a class, let's say, each person has a little piece of that puzzle, but none of those pieces make a whole lot of sense by themselves, those little 1-inch pieces of that 8x10 photograph of an apple. But if we're dealing with a holographic plate, let's say, or a holographic piece of film, and we've got a picture of an apple, holographic film, or a holographic plate, and let's take the holographic film, and we begin to cut it into pieces. You would think it would be the same thing, just like with the photograph, where you have all of these little fragments that don't make any sense, but that's not what happens. Actually, what happens is that every piece contains the whole image of the apple. Now, over time, if you continue to do that, the resolution will be impacted negatively, but it's still the whole is contained in the piece, and the piece in the whole, much like DNA, much like Hebrew. And so I believe that the Bible in many ways is very holographic, and I think that the book of Revelation is. And so we begin to think of it maybe as a whole structure. And I'm not claiming to fully understand that, but I'm going to present some ideas of, I think these things are multidimensional and have many different levels. And I'm going to talk about what I think maybe one of those things are when we're talking about the book of Revelation or even the whole Bible. There are, if you look at the book of Revelation, you'll notice right away the frequency of the number 7, practically everywhere in that book. The 7 candlesticks, the 7 churches, the 7 letters to the 7 churches, the 7 horns on the Lamb, the 7 horns on the dragon, the 7 seals, the 7 trumpets, the 7 vials, and it goes on and on and on. And I'm not sure exactly how many 7s are. One time I counted them, and I thought that there might have been 17 different kinds of 7s, but maybe there's more. I don't know. You can count them and see what you come up with. But there are, so we've got the number 7 everywhere. So it's wanting us, we're supposed to really think about that number 7 hard. And so we have to go back to the beginning. Sometime I'll do maybe a video on the number 7 and go into a lot of the meanings of it. I'm not going to do that so much here. How many chapters are there in the book of Revelation? Because that's going to be important. I think it's very important in this case. There are 22 chapters in the book of Revelation. You might be thinking, so what? What does that matter? Well, hopefully that will mean more and make more sense as we get a little further along. Right away, if you're a student of the scriptures, and particularly trying to see things through more of a Hebraic lens, you will know that there are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. And I'll do more about that maybe in the future when it comes to the book of Revelation, but I just want to kind of mention that now, that the 22 chapters are no accident, because that is going to relate directly to the concept of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Originally, in the Tanakh, or what is typically called by what I almost see really as a pejorative, the Old Testament. Now we have 39 books in the, quote, Old Testament or Tanakh. Originally there were 22 books in the Tanakh. Creation. Creation was accomplished in 6 working days, and God resting the Sabbath or the Shabbat. But he did 22 specific acts during that time. Okay, from Adam until Abraham, there were 20 generations. That would make Isaac the 21st generation, and Jacob the 22nd generation. Jacob is the 22nd generation from Adam. Okay, that's significant because this is the guy that the Almighty said, I'm going to call myself by his name. He is known as the God of Israel, the God of Jacob. Okay, and that the God took on the name of that person and of the name of that people that he became, the God of Israel, 22nd generation. Interestingly, in the book of John, like in chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and so on. And it says basically that there was a man who came to bear witness of the light. He was not that light, but came to bear witness of the light. And the word light, or a form of it, is mentioned 7 times in chapter 1 of John. John, obviously, hopefully you realize, is the author of the book of Revelation. And the word light is mentioned 22 times in the book of John. Joseph is one of the best pictures of the Messiah. He's a messianic picture. If you want to look, most of the book of Genesis is about Joseph. When people think about the book of Genesis, they normally think about creation, and certainly that's there, but that only takes up a couple of pages. Most of the Bible, most of the time in the face time, is given to Joseph. And it gives us some interesting specifics regarding Joseph, that he was 17 years old when he was sold into slavery. So he was with the son and father were together for 17 years. Okay, again, Joseph is an extremely important, prominent messianic figure. In Judaism, it was believed and is believed that there would be 2 Messiahs. Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah son of Joseph, and Mashiach ben David, Messiah son of David, because of having a difficult time reconciling different prophecies, different things that the Messiah would accomplish. But one of those things is Messiah ben Joseph. So Joseph is a major picture of the Messiah. Sometime I have talked about that a lot, but sometime I'll maybe do a video devoted to just that. So he was sold into bondage when he was 17. He was separated from his father when he was 17 years old. He went to Egypt, and he was separated from Jacob for 22 years. After 22 years of separation, so they were together for 17 years. They were separated for 22 years. They were reunited, and then they spent 17 years together again before Jacob died. So we've got 17 years of the father and son together. we have 22 years of them separated, and then 17 years again reunited. And 17 is the seventh prime number, by the way. So it's a 7 number. By the way, I want to just throw this in case there's any misunderstanding about this. I did very bad in math in school. I made like an F in algebra class. I hated math. But I wish that I would have had some teachers explain mathematics in a way that I might have appreciated and understood better. If I understood that mathematics, that those numbers mean things, and that mathematics is a language, I think it would have had I think I would have been much more interested, and I would have seen much more value in it than I did at the time. Hopefully, maybe this will kind of have the same result for you, maybe. Okay. In the scriptures, in the book of Numbers, there's a census given. There's several of those, but in Numbers chapter 1, because in chapter 32 of Exodus that we have the golden calf incident, major debacle there. But when Moses said, "Who is on the Lord's side? Let him come unto me." Well, the Levites did. And so from the Levites came the priesthood. Originally, what was going to happen is that all the firstborn of all the tribes would have been priests. But after the golden calf, that changed, and now Levi is going to be where the priests come from that tribe. And so Levi is not counted with the rest of the other tribes. There was a remnant, the Levites, who in the time of Moses took a stand against what was happening in the culture with the golden calf. And we know from the census in Numbers chapter 1, the census is in Numbers chapter 1, but it's a little bit later. It may be chapter 2, maybe, when we're told the number of the Levites, and it's an easy number to remember because it's an even number. There were 22,000. There were 22,000 in this remnant that took a stand against the golden calf and what was happening in the culture at that time. Likewise, Elijah, who is the mirror opposite of Moses in many respects, and sometime I'm gonna present a study that I have on that subject. In Elijah's time, he thought that he was the only one, and in 1 Kings, but Paul in the book of Romans chapter 11, in discussing this, he discusses that passage, and he says that just like in those times when Elijah thought he was the Lone Ranger, he thought he was the only one, and God responded to him and he said, "No, I've reserved unto myself 7,000 that haven't bowed the knee or kissed the image of Baal." And so it says likewise in Romans 11 that just like what happened in Elijah's time, God has preserved a remnant to this very day. So the number 7, the number 7,000, both of those numbers, they deal in part with the idea of a remnant. So again, in the day of Moses, there was a remnant of Levites of 22,000. His opposite, Elijah, in that time, there was a remnant of 7,000. Okay, this stuff hopefully will make a little more sense of why I'm getting into this in a moment or two. I mentioned earlier that Jacob, or Israel, was the 22nd generation from Adam. From Adam to Israel were 22 generations. There is a guy mentioned in the little book of Jude that Jude specifies what generation that this guy is in, and I'm not sure that of anybody else that is mentioned where it says they're of a particular generation. but it does regarding Enoch. In the little book of Jude, it says that Enoch, the seventh from Adam. Okay, so for some reason, Jude was inspired to remind us that Enoch from Adam was the seventh generation. The menorah. The menorah is one of the things that we see right away in the book of Revelation, chapter 1. John says, and I being turned, I saw 7 golden candlesticks. So he's seeing a menorah, and sometime I will go into more detail about that in another study. The menorah obviously has 7 lampstands or candlesticks, but in the book of Exodus, chapter 25, it tells us that it has these different designs. It's got all kinds of designs on it, but one in particular that I find interesting, on the lampstand itself, on the shaft, there are 4 almond decorations. 4 almond decorations. The almond tree has a lot of significance. But on the other 6 branches that come off of the center lampstand, or the menorah itself, there's 3 on each one. So we've got 4 down the center of the lampstand, plus the 6 branches that have 3 on each one, which would 6 times 3 would be 18, plus the 4 gives us 22. Okay, so we've got the 7 lamps, the 7 candlesticks, and we have 22 almond knobs or decorations on that. Let's talk about pi for a second. Not the kind you eat, but the mathematical kind. 3.141593 ... goes on forever and ever. And it is what pi is. Well, let me hold off on that just a bit, but I'll just kind of define that. Pi is the ratio from the circumference of a circle to its diameter. So it deals with a circle or something circular. Okay. Sometime maybe I'll talk about the golden laver, or the copper laver. Actually, in Solomon's time, there was one in the Mishkan or tabernacle that's mentioned in the book of Exodus, and then in Solomon's time there's a great big one, and it sits on the back of 12 oxen, 3 each direction, just like the encampments of the tribes. And so pi is the ratio from the circumference of the circle to its diameter, from one side to the other side. Okay, hang with me here. I mean, it's the way that I like to describe that, because the word ratio sounds very scientific, I guess. I like to use the word relationship. The pi is the relationship from the diameter to the circumference. We'll come back to that in just a second. So I mentioned pi is 3.14. I've talked about Gematria quite a bit in the videos, that Gematria is the numerical value in Hebrew. Other languages have forms of Gematria. It's like every letter, every word, every sentence can be interpreted as numerical values. So unlike English, for example, where an A is an A and the number 1 is a number 1, in Hebrew it's the same thing. So when you're looking at a Torah scroll, for example, with all of these letters, really you're looking at something with numerical digits throughout the whole thing. Every one of those letters is a number. It's pretty amazing, really. Some of you are familiar, hopefully many of you, with the weekly Torah portion, or Parsha, a section or division that is read each week. It's often called, or not often, you don't hear it near as much, of Sederim instead of the Torah portions. It's also referred to as Sederim, and those the Hebrew word Sederim has numerical value of 314. So the word that describes how the Torah portions are broken down into those sections is 314. Some of you may be familiar with the mezuzah. Some of you have mezuzahs on your doorpost. In the book of Deuteronomy, for one place, it tells us that you are to place these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul, bind them for a sign upon your hand, and let them be for frontlets between your eyes. Write them upon the doorpost of your house and upon your gates. And so that is called, the word for doorpost is mezuzah, and that's what this little thing is called. Normally about this big, maybe about, I don't know, they vary in size, but normally probably about that size. Almost all of them will have the Hebrew letter Shin on it. The Hebrew letter Shin, it's the 21st letter of the Hebrew alphabet, normally would correspond to our letter S or SH, because it could be pronounced as a S sound or a sh sound, depending upon the placement of the dot at the top. Okay. Why the Shin? What does the Shin represent on the menorah? The Shin is there to represent the name of God, Shaddai. Many of you have heard of El Shaddai. Shaddai is, El Shaddai means often translated as God Almighty, or it could be translated as the all-sufficient God. Shaddai is spelled with the Shin, with the which is the 21st letter, the 4th letter, the Dalet, and the 10th letter, the Yud, are often called the Yod. So if we total those letters together, that's on the menorah, that's on all of the portals. Sometime I'll do maybe a video going into portals. On the portals of your house, the doorpost and the gates, is the mezuzah. The mezuzah has on the mezuzah has the Shin, which represents Shaddai. Shaddai has numerical value of 314. Okay, so you basically have pi represented on the portals. Okay, so I've been talking about pi for the last little bit, 3.14, right? The ratio or the relationship from the diameter of a circle to its circumference. And I've been giving you all of these places throughout Scripture in which certain numbers occur, and many of them occur together. And I'll rattle off a few of them again real quick. That their creation was completed in 7 days, but 22 specific things were done over that period of time. Jacob was the 22nd generation, and Enoch that is mentioned specifically as the 7th generation from Adam. There are 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. There were originally 22 letters in the 22 books in the Tanakh or Old Testament. By the way, there are 5 final forms in the Hebrew language. So you've got 22 ways that you write the letter, 22 basic letters, but then there are five letters that have what's called a sophete or final form. So 22 basic letters, and then if you count all of their final forms, there's 27. So originally there was 22 books in the Tanakh. How many books are there in the Brit Chadashah or the New Testament? 27. The number of the Hebrew alphabet with its final forms included. By the way, if you're interested in this, and sometime I want to do something on acrostics, but one prominent one that you can check out is in Psalm 119. Psalm 119 is the longest chapter in the entire Bible. It is broken down into 22 sections of 8 verses each for a total of 176 verses. So most Bibles, or many of them, if you look above each section of 8, it will have the corresponding Hebrew letter, because in the Hebrew, every verse is going to start with that Hebrew letter. So if this were like English, the first 8 verses, every sentence would all begin with an A. And then the next one, they would all begin with a B, so on throughout the whole alphabet. But we're talking Hebrew here, so there's 22 sections, and each of those begin with the corresponding Hebrew letter. Okay, and there's a lot of places where these acrostics, or these alphanumerical patterns, appear in the Tanakh, or Old Testament. But the book of Revelation, as I mentioned, has 22 chapters, just like the Hebrew alphabet, with the prominent number of 7 everywhere. I mentioned earlier, in the days of Moses, there was a remnant of 22,000, and in the days of Elijah, his mirror opposite, there were 7,000. Joseph was separated he was with his father for 17 years. 17 is the 7th prime. They were separated for 22 years and reunited and spent 17 more years together. So it's a 7 number. So these things happen, seems like quite a bit, and it's wanting to get our attention. So earlier I talked about maybe we have been presumptuously thinking and reading the book of Revelation. Maybe it is not necessarily linear, and maybe many things are not linear like people think. That's more of a Greek way to think. I have no problem with thinking linear, as long as we realize that we use it as a tool, and realize, whether you're talking about timelines or anything else, it is limited, and it's only one way, and it's not the totality of truth doing it that way. So why do I keep talking about these things, and why do I keep and I brought pi up? Because usually we see pi represented as 3.14 as a decimal, but you can express pi in other ways, and the most simple, accurate way to represent pi, like if we were to do it as a fraction, is 22 over 7. 22 over 7, or 22 to 7, is pi. And so perhaps there's a clue there in maybe a way that we can look at the book of Revelation and look at other things, rather than thinking of it just linear, thinking of it as pi. And again, pi is the relationship from the linear to the cyclical. It's the relationship from the diameter to the circumference, and that's another way we could say that. It connects this amazing magical number that goes on forever and ever, that's infinite, that no recognizable patterns that I know of still have been found, and it goes on forever and ever. So it's infinite. So like, it's amazing to me that in a penny, something so tiny, that if we measure the circumference and the diameter, the connection between those two things is infinite, between those two realms. Because we're talking about two different realms, and we're talking about a line and a circle. We're talking about two different realms, linear and cyclical. But in pi, those two very unlike each other things are reconciled and unified. Some other examples of that, I don't know if I have it here. Yeah, if we, it's easier for us to measure across a circle, or the diameter, because we've got physical beginning and ending. It's more difficult if you're trying to measure the circumference. You've got to pick an arbitrary point to measure from, because the outside of a circle is eternal. It has no beginning and no end, unlike the line or the diameter that has a definite beginning place and a definite ending place. So we can measure those things, the beginning and end of that. So we also have that aspect. Pi represents something with a definite beginning and end, or finite, with something that has no beginning and end, that is eternal. But pi, again, connects or mediates between the finite and the eternal. We are creatures that have choice. We've been given choice to make. Now, within limits, a lot of people never have thought about that, but we have choice, but there are limitations on that choice. Can't choose to never die. There's a lot of things that are choices outside of your purview. And so choice has to be done within a space where there is time and space, beginnings and endings, okay? In other words, a more linear plane. But outside of that is something eternal. Sovereignty, the sovereignty of God. Destiny, if you want to say it that way. Predestination or destiny. A lot of these concepts are difficult for people to reconcile. And so you have people on one side of an issue saying, okay, man is a free will agent and he has choice. And you have other people that say, no, we're predestined. And it's all about destiny. In pi, well, you have people saying it's all about works. It's about works or God's instructions. Linear. On the other hand, other people say, no, it's all about grace. An eternal thing. And so in pi, we have, now who mediates all of that stuff? Because that's what we should really get. Who do all of those things focus upon? Something or someone, that number that goes on forever and ever and ever, 3.14, that connects two very different realms, the linear realm and the cyclical realm, finite and eternity, choice and destiny, all of these things. Well, the Messiah does that. And Messiah is the mediator between God and man. No man, no one comes to the Father except through him. There's one God and there's one mediator between God and man, the man, Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christ. Okay? So I propose to you that pi represents on one level the Messiah and the Messiah's function, and gives us a way of viewing things like the book of Revelation, where we're not just seeing that book presumptively or with presumption as being automatically chronological or automatically linear or automatically future. I'm proposing that on one level, the book of Revelation may well be constructed like pi. And so it can deal with all of those kinds of things at once and mediate between them. I hope this has been of interest to you, and maybe this will spawn some studies or other questions, and if nothing else, cause you to look at the book of Revelation with new eyes and new lenses, and kind of in a more outside of the box way in the future. You guys take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, if you like this video, please click like and subscribe to be notified whenever we release new content, and to help other people find us out there on the vast plains of YouTube land. If you have a question or a topic you'd like for us to do a video about, just leave it in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Later, y'all.